Before we get started today, I wanted to say thank you to my latest Patreon supporters, who I lovingly call my friends with benefits. I really appreciate the support of Best Forevers and the movement to love on our friends more. So a major shout out to Ashley and Justine of Cutaways Podcast for being my latest friends with benefits. Thank you so much for being a part of Best Forevers. And what's so great about this is that I love Cutaways Podcast. I love Ashley and Justine. It's one of my favorite podcasts. So it's even more exciting to have support from people that you respect and admire and like so much. So thank you so much, Ashley and Justine. And for those of you who haven't listened to Cutaways Podcast, what are you waiting for? They have a large library of episodes that you can listen to, and you definitely want to get them in your ear hole stat. You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more in your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I'm feeling a little uncertain. Right? Oh, that feeling of not knowing, not understanding, not being able to explain what's going on. It can take over. It can take over anxiety. I'm in the second week of classes, so as I go into my new classes last week, feelings of uncertainty of how the semester's going to go. I have a new role on campus, so how's that going to go? Oh, just lots of things going on that we feel uncertainty a lot. And if you're not familiar with uncertainty, you probably feel it, but maybe don't know how to define it. So uncertainty is defined by communication scholars Berger and Calabrese. It is, quote, the inability to predict or explain the attitudes or behaviors of someone, end quote. So this is, we don't feel like we know or understand someone. How many of you feel this way? I imagine we've all felt this way with strangers and those first interactions of not knowing what's going on, with coworkers, with family members, romantic partners, and of course, with our friends. Berger and Calabrese are the scholars behind the first fully formed communication theory called uncertainty reduction theory. This theory is very popular, is one of the first theories I talk about when I teach my theory class to students at Central Michigan University, and it is certainly the theory that's probably been applied the most in our field, and it's extended in a lot of different ways. But let me tell you a little bit about this theory. In this theory, they focus on uncertainty and initial interactions and how we might try to reduce our uncertainty through communication, because overall uncertainty is negative and it's not comfortable. And if we feel that way, we want to do something to reduce it. So we try to fix that negative experience by increasing our ability to predict others' behaviors. So maybe if we're in an initial interaction, we might ask questions to learn more about someone, and then we might feel better, right? Oh, this person seems cool, or, I like this person, or they seem really warm, like they were very welcoming. Like there's lots of ways to decrease uncertainty through different types of communication. Here's the thing though. Sure, some people enjoy uncertainty, and I know there's some of you out there, you weirdos. No, just kidding. Embrace it, love it. I am not someone who enjoys uncertainty, but I know some people thrive on that, like excitement or adrenaline and the not knowing and the mystery, and I am not one of those people. Some people, probably like myself, manage it every single day that we have uncertainty. And I can tell you a story about when I lived in New York and I was working at Mansfield University. I was working at the YMCA, but that is, as you probably know, a family-oriented location, and they didn't have the same hours that I was looking for. And so although I've used the YMCA for years and in many different cities, I decided to look into Snap Fitness. And if you're not familiar with Snap Fitness, as far as I understand it, at least the location in New York was the door's locked, and then you have a pass, like a little, I guess that sounds like a car fob, but it's like a little card that gets you in, like security, like you're, work for the Department of Homeland Security or the FBI. It's like, and you're in, right? And so I saw that we had Snap Fitness downtown, and I was like, oh, it's like 24/7, so I can go at the time I want to on Sundays, or I can do it a little bit later on Mondays. It fits my schedule. But if you want to join, how do you get in there? Because the door is locked. And so I had a lot of uncertainty about this place and how to get in there and if I'd feel welcome. And just all sorts of stuff. So I would say that there's probably weeks or so that would go by before I figured out that they're open at certain times and you can walk in. Finally, I joined. But it's a little embarrassing, I guess, but not so much. It's like I had some uncertainty, but once I figured it out, it was okay. And so I think that is, like many of us every day, we're just trying to figure it out. Okay, so we have people who enjoy it. You have people like me who are like trying to manage it and figuring out how to get into Snap Fitness. And then there's other people who might be crushed by feelings of uncertainty every single day. And so the idea here, and with the theory, in terms of the critiques and how people understand this theory, some people might be more motivated than others to reduce their uncertainty because not everyone sees uncertainty as a negative experience. Those with low uncertainty would certainly feel more confident in being able to predict or explain someone's attitudes or behaviors, whereas high uncertainty is not having that confidence about your ability to predict or explain. As I mentioned, uncertainty work has extended in a lot of ways beyond these initial interactions, and there's multiple other theories that explain different things based on this first theory of uncertainty reduction theory. And so one of the ways it's extended is through established relationships. These are our friendships, our dating relationships that already exist. And so maybe we went through that initial uncertainty as we were developing friendships or relationships, but now that we're in the relationship, uncertainty might not be the case all the time. It might happen when things change or there's different transitions or different things happen. And so we do need to understand uncertainty in relationships that already do exist. So Leanne Knobloch's work has looked into this, and specifically, she's focused on self, partner, and relational uncertainty. And there's a chapter that I used that's in my show notes with all the other sources from today. And in this chapter, it says that self-uncertainty involves the thoughts that we have about our own involvement in a relationship. So, what am I? Am I a good friend? Am I a good partner? Feeling uncertain about my role and how I'm doing in the relationship. Then you have partner uncertainty, which is the questions we might have about our partner's involvement. Do they see me as a friend? Do they still want to be my friend? Things like that. And then we have relationship uncertainty that focuses on overall doubts about the relationship as a whole. Like, maybe we're just not meant to be together. That's sad. We don't have to be meant to be. You just work at it, people. But a lot of these relationship, talking about relational uncertainty has focused on romantic relationships. And as I just used in examples, I think this very much can be applied to friendship. But one of the things to consider, as Knobloch noted in her chapter, is that these types of experiences of uncertainty can be global, which means just overall you have self, partner, relationship uncertainty. It might not matter who the partner is. You might feel uncertainty. And then you might also experience it because of a certain event. So something happened, and then that increased your uncertainty. Which leads me to the work of Planup and Honeycutt. And this was done in 1985. And they revealed 6 different events that increase uncertainty in our interpersonal relationships. And they focused on dating relationships and friendships, which I'm sure I've discussed before in the podcast because I think these bring in a lot of ways to understand how we might feel in different situations. But because this episode focuses on uncertainty, we're going to talk about it again here. So events that might make us feel like, okay, let me say it this way. We know people, we understand people, and then something happens and that can completely change. And that is when our uncertainty is increased, when we thought we knew someone or we thought we understood someone, and then something happens to change that. And so they found 6 primary events that increased our uncertainty. And the first one is competing relationships. This is discovering that a friend or a dating partner wanted to spend time with someone else. And given that I've talked a lot about jealousy on this podcast, I think competing relationships can increase uncertainty that might lead into feeling a little jealous because there's relationship loss if you feel like your friend is spending more time with someone else than they are with you. Or that this has been your best friend since 2nd grade and now they've transitioned into college and you're not at the same college and they're making all these new friends, right? Or your friend moves and you don't get to spend a lot of time with them because you're at a great distance because they got this new job and they had to move to a different state. There's lots of different competing relationships that can exist. The second event that can increase uncertainty is explain loss of contact of closeness. And this occurs when communication or intimacy of the friendship or dating relationship has decreased for no particular reason. So you might experience increased uncertainty because you don't understand why it feels like the person isn't communicating with you. And I think this relates to ghosting, which I talked about in the episode called Haunted, which came out on Halloween, because ghosting is a little scary, am I right? And so I think that can happen. Other times it can happen, though, and if we really think of different ways to understand it, that unexplained loss of contact of closeness might just be because they have a big exam or there's a big project at work or it's just been hectic or there's been something else that's happened, right? And so maybe we just need to figure out so that we can explain it, right? And explaining it would allow us to predict and to reduce our uncertainty. The third event is sexual behavior, and this is discovering that a friend or a dating partner has had sexual behavior with another person. And I think this can be quite different on what we're talking about, right? If it's your dating partner, you might have an expectation that they not have sexual relations with another person, and so that can cause a lot of uncertainty about the future of your relationship. Am I right? In terms of friends, you could be having a sexual relationship with your friend and have those same feelings, or your friend could be having sexual relations with someone that is surprising to you and it increases uncertainty. Maybe the behavior is unlike how you know them. Maybe it's with their ex and you're surprised that that's happened. Maybe it's with one of your exes and then you're like, hey, what's going on here? So I think that one can increase uncertainty in different ways depending on how that sexual behavior is associated with you, right? Is it a direct violation of your relationship, or is it something that is surprising? The fourth event is deception. And I say this all the time, folks, that people tend to be more upset by the deception than they are about what they're lying about. So they could be lying about that sexual behavior, but a lot of times people might be more upset that they were lied to. And so, of course, this is when you discover that friends or dating partners have lied, fabricated information, or have been misleading. And I think it's because it just is a cut through trust in the relationship and people feel betrayed. So it is likely to increase a lot of uncertainty. The fifth one is change in personality or values. And this occurs when people realize that their friends or dating partner are different from what they used to be. So I know that, let's say in a dating relationship and it's getting serious and you're getting engaged, and you've talked about having kids, and then as you get ready to get married or you are married, and then your dating partner is like, I no longer want to have children. That is very much a change in values or personality that's going to impact both parties and the relationship. So in friendship, this could be, and I've had a lot of students tell me about this, where they come to college and they move in and they're roommates with their best friends, and then they join some group or organization on campus. It could be anything. So I don't want to stereotype here with like Greek life or with the marching band or whatever. It could be anything. And that maybe being around those people would go back to competing relationships. But then it also feels like maybe their personality changes as they grow in that group or they're around those people. Or maybe they were like, I'm never going to join that, and then they do, and so that's a change in their personality. Another one that I've seen is when friends talk about when they realize that their friend has started doing drugs or an addiction that they didn't know about has become realized, and so it brings up a lot of uncertainty. The final event that can increase uncertainty, according to Plum Up and Honeycutt, is betraying confidences. And this includes instances in which people's friends or dating partners disclose private information to others about them without their consent. And so I think especially for friendship, this is a huge violation that is part of what friendship is. Like, you better keep my secrets, right? And it shouldn't always have to be, quote unquote, said, don't tell anyone else. If it feels and sounds very personal, that isn't something like, hey, I'm going to go tell some people about this. Maybe post it on Facebook. Maybe announce it in some sort of like text blast or something. Like, no. But that is something that, again, that goes back to trust. And so if we don't trust people, that can certainly increase our uncertainty. So like these events, and including with this last one here, betraying confidence, it gets also at the idea of violations of relationship expectations or rules that we might have. And that might change the way our ability to predict, know, and understand other people like our friends. So if you violate a rule or a relationship expectation, then we might feel some uncertainty because there's been this change. In fact, we might have individual rules and expectations for our friendships, and what can be really difficult is when your uncertainty increases because a friend has violated a rule or an expectation that they don't know about. So if you have your own personal expectations or rules, that's a great conversation to have with your friend, or maybe realizing that they don't know your expectation, that maybe that level of uncertainty, you might decrease it because you realize you can't predict here because you haven't given them a chance to know and respond to that information that you have. So we might have these individual rules or expectations, and some people might be like, this is a big deal for me in friendship, and so these are my deal breakers, much like how romantic partners might discuss them. Or we may follow these 10 friendship rules found by Argyle and Henderson in 1984 because they're generally agreed upon rules. So we might have societal or cultural rules for friendship that just seem like common knowledge that we follow. And so even though you might not explicitly brought this rule up or this expectation up, you might go, well, I think, friends are supposed to do this or avoid this. And so here are the 10 generally agreed upon rules. The first one is to show support. So if your friend is going through something, experiencing a breakup, a loss, a difficult day, a difficult week, whatever the case might be, it's that you're there to provide whatever support they might need. And I've talked about social support with my friend and colleague Tara on the episode The Chick to Her Duck, so you can go back and hear more about the different types of support. But that includes if you're just there to listen, and that might be emotional support, or you make the person feel good about themselves, so that's esteem support. Maybe you give them advice, and so that's informational support, that you're just there to show support, that you're there for them, and maybe help them in a way that they need at that time. But even more, that as a friend, if I'm going through something, that I'm going to seek out support from my friend, which is the second rule. Seeking support, I think, is critical in friendship because support is a primary behavior that friends do and, again, might be expected, right? And so if you're always providing support for your friend, but you don't seek it out from them, that can increase a lot of uncertainty. But one of the things that I say is, as long as the person is getting support they need, then I'm A-okay with it. But it's one of those things is there nothing I can do? Can I provide you with a witty, funny joke, maybe a meme to brighten your day? Is there nothing I can do for you? But again, if they're getting support, that makes me happy. But most people would assume that their friends would seek out support at some time. The third rule and the fourth rule probably get confused a lot, and so I'm going to talk about them together. Rule 3 is respecting the privacy of your friends, and Rule 4 is keeping confidences, which I talked about with those events, right? Respecting privacy is different from confidences. Respecting privacy means that knowing that your friend has stuff that is their own, information, experiences, whatever the case is, that they don't need to tell you every single thing in the world, and that you don't pressure them to tell you about something just because you want to know or you think you should know. Now, if it relates to you and has an impact on you, then I might encourage people to share that information, but just know that they don't need to tell you everything that has happened in their family. They don't need to say everything that they've done with their boyfriend or girlfriend. They don't need to talk about all of the issues that they're going through, or that they will when they're ready, and that will go back to seeking support. So it's respecting privacy. This is different than if they actually come to you and share their secret or information or what's happened to them. It's being sure that you don't tell people, because as we've learned, betraying confidences can increase uncertainty. The next two go together as well. Defending your friends is rule number 5, and number 6 is avoiding public criticism. So when we're in public, or I guess in private, and we hear people talking badly about our friends, or that they're doing it to their face, that we're there to defend our friends. Like, if your friend isn't there, you're like, no, I'm not comfortable with this conversation. I don't think this is accurate. I don't think we should be having this conversation because my best friend is the best. So you need to bring it down a notch. Or if your friend is there, it's like, hey, leave my friend alone. Right? It's any of those things that you can do to defend your friends. However, you might see that as people have public criticism about your friend and you're defending them because they're your friend to the end. And so you're going to defend them. However, we might, as friends, have criticism of our own friends. Not everything is perfect. Not everything is puppy dogs and ice cream. When it comes to friendship, that friendship, much like everything else, is life. There's ups and downs. There's changes. There's things that we like. There's things that we don't like. And so we have to deal with those things, right? We have to come at it and figure out what we're going to do about it. Well, one of the things that you should avoid is publicly criticizing your friend in front of other people. Because I think what happens is that, one, people will be like, you're talking about your friend behind their back, and they can go back and tell your friend. And I mean, it seems very high school, but I imagine that this happens no matter people's age. And then the idea of public criticism, I can take and apply from romantic relationships. So this is the example I have. Let's say you have a good friend that's a coworker, and you go in and you're complaining about your romantic partner. Oh, you're just so frustrated that you're supposed to go out and they were late, and then they didn't want to go out, and then they were rude during it all, and it just was a waste of time. Let's say that happened, right? And you come in on Monday and you talk about it and you complain about it to that coworker. And then a couple weeks go by and then something else happens and you complain about your partner. And it happens again and again and again. So what happens is the coworker only hears the complaints or the negativity. And so when they meet your partner, guess what happens? They're not going to like them because all they've heard is negative feedback or negative stories or complaints about them. So the same thing can be applied to friendship, is that if you're often criticizing your friends, people are going to start to wonder, why is this your friend? Because we might spend more time talking about negative stuff than we do positive stuff, right? We talk about the things that are bothering us, and we are typically just sort of soak up the things that are positive and going right. And so when things are positive and going right and we're soaking it up, we might not be going around going, my friends are the best and I had the best weekend and all these great things happen. Instead, it's like, and then they did this and it annoyed me, So we have to be careful about public criticism because it can really have an impact on how other people view your friendship, but also view your friend specifically and assume that the person is not good enough to be your friend or is not a good person because they've only heard one side of it. Rule number 7 is make your friends happy. And I think this is the idea, is that friendship is about enjoyment and that we have volunteer relationships, right? These are voluntary relationships. And so we want to be around people that we enjoy being around. And so if it's constant negativity, constant toxic behaviors or toxic environment, that it becomes where you're not so happy and you're like, well, I'm not friends with this person, right? And that might be where conflict comes up or people ghost and that sort of thing because they don't want to be in those friendships anymore. So the idea is that you are focusing on enjoyment. However, again, that does not take away the fact that not everything is perfect, right? There are going to be weeks, there's going to be days that aren't going right for people. There's going to be fights or disagreements among friends. But it's overall that the positivity outweighs the negativity. And so that is something to consider. Number 8 is managing jealousy. And I think that from this podcast, I hope that you understand that jealousy is something that definitely happens in friendship, but it might not be seen as justified as in romantic relationships, which I think is a little bit of a falsehood, but I can also understand people's point of view on that. And the reason being is that we would expect that friends have multiple friends, that it's not just like, I have a best friend and that's it, and she can never see anyone else or be friends with anyone else. And, there might be some people that view friendship in that way, and that friendship is seen as hierarchy, right? Like I have best friends and dear friends and close friends and coworker friends, and, people see it in that way. But the idea is that you have more than one friend, And that might be different than our view of romantic relationships where we have one partner. But the idea is that no matter if you're in friendships or romantic partners, you can experience jealousy. And that is, again, when you experience some loss of relationship quality to a relationship that you value. So they could be spending less time with you because they're spending more time with other friends or with their partner or in the workplace. And certainly jealousy is going to occur. So this rule is more about understanding that, okay, well, they're going out with some of their work friends tonight and I don't work there. So of course I'm not invited. Like, I don't want to be the 17th wheel at this happy hour and the only person I know is my friend, and then I take them away from their coworkers. And so if that's the case, it's kind of like what you can do to manage your jealousy is to just have that talk with yourself, like, hey, self, it's okay. It's she's hanging out or he's hanging out with the work friends. We'll do something later. So you might text him and be like, hey, I know you're doing happy hour on Friday with your coworkers, but what are you doing on Saturday? Or do you want to watch the game on Sunday or whatever the case might be? The other thing you could do is think about making plans with other friends. And so those are just different ways in which to manage jealousy. So it's not about saying like, this can't happen. It's like, okay, I feel this way, but why do I feel this way? And what can I do about it? Sharing humor is the 9th rule. And I think it goes along with number 7 of making your friends happy. You laugh about things. You have those funny memes that you send to each other. You appreciate each other's humor, even if you only find each other funny or the things that you think is funny, not everyone else does, but that's sort of what makes your friendship, which makes me think of the episode with Mitch and Zach called Ope, Jump Out, Gucci, which you definitely have to check out, but they talk a lot about their inside jokes and sharing vines and memes and things like that. And I think they're really an excellent example of two friends sharing humor. And then finally, rule number 10, maintain equity. Okay, our friendships are not Regina George and Gretchen Wieners from Mean Girls, where Regina clearly has more power than Gretchen. That's not what friendship is about. Friendship is about, these are peer relationships. That means you have some equal footing, you have equal power. That might not always be the case, or that might change a little bit depending on what's going on in the friendship. But overall, equity might be that what I'm putting in is what my friend is putting in, and we're both getting something out of it. So it is equitable. I'm not being taken advantage of. I'm not giving all this and not getting anything back, because if people violated this rule, people feel under-benefited, and then that's a violation. It can increase uncertainty, and they might determine whether or not they want to be in that friendship. So let me ask you this. What rules or expectations do you have in your friendships? What would happen if a friend violated the rules that you have, or these rules in general? How would you feel? Do you think it would increase your uncertainty about yourself, your friend, or the relationship? And what would you do about it? So going back to the research on the events, Planup and Honeycutt suggested that when people experience uncertainty in increasing events, which could also include violations of these rules, when these things happen when it was unexpected, that people have to figure out how to adjust. They found that these events impacted thoughts, emotions, and the relationship. And even more, the trajectories of the relationships were affected. And in the study, over 1/4 of the relationships terminated as a direct result of the event, and another 1/3 of those relationships became less close. So when you think about uncertainty increasing events, that there can be a lot of negative consequences, especially when the emotions associated with them are negative, like feeling betrayed by deception or the sharing of your secrets. However, these kinds of events or violations of rules can be a time that brings people closer together because they have a conversation about it. And it might just depend on how people respond if expectations are violated or one feels that increased uncertainty in their friendship. Do you immediately see it as something negative? Is it a deal breaker? Is it something that you want to learn more about, that you want to reduce your uncertainty, have a conversation? Be like, okay, let's talk about this expectation in our relationship. Let's talk about this specific event. How are we going to go from here? So there are a number of ways to manage uncertainty outlined in the textbook Close Encounters, Communication and Relationships by Guerrero, Anderson, and Afifi, and including using passive, active, and interactive strategies. So first, passive strategies usually includes some kind of observation of your friend. Maybe you're going to a party that night, you feel like your friend's been a little distant, and so maybe you see how they communicate with you at the party or with their other friends at the party, just to see if that might help you explain, predict, or understand the friend. I think doing something like that, just kind of like seeing how the next interaction goes, or if you text them, seeing how the texting goes, I think that is okay. That seems like a general good first step in trying to reduce uncertainty, right? Without bringing a whole lot of attention to maybe what's going on. However, let me put an asterisk on that. Too much observation becomes problematic because it's seen as intrusive. And certainly if you're like, I've been watching my friend for the last 3 weeks or for the last 3 months, that's obviously stalking, which is criminal. It's extreme, but it can happen. And you don't want to look at it and be like, oh, my friend observed me in one interaction. That is so stalkery, or she's a creeper. That might be going a little too far. I think it's just kind of seeing how things go. But doing it too much, that's going to cause more problems. That might increase your friend's uncertainty. And then certainly in extreme circumstances, it can move over to real relationship intrusion and stalking. The second strategy is active, and there are a couple different ways that we can implement this strategy. The first one is we can ask third parties about our friend. So if they have a roommate, you might be like, hey, how's she been doing? Or how's he? What's up with him? Or you might ask a romantic partner, family member, someone in class, whatever the case is. You might just see how your friend's doing. Maybe that third person reminds you that they had a big exam that week and you're like, oh crap, I just forgot because I also had a lot going on. And you're like, okay, that helps me predict, explain, and understand. Maybe they could just say, oh, they've just been having like a tough week. Okay, cool. I'll just wait and see how that goes. Maybe the friend will tell you about the bad week because they seek out your support, like going back to the friendship rules. So that I think, can be helpful. But there's also a second way to use active strategies that I think might be less productive, and that is where people set up what are called secret tests. They set something up to see specifically how their friend would respond, right? So, and it's like, okay, folks, we're not all little researchers setting up experiments and controlling for variables and having people participate in what might be seen as a prank or being embarrassing to their friend if they find out that's what's going on. But most of all, I think they're going to be pretty mad if you're pulling a secret test, right? Like seeing how they behave based on something that you specifically set up. So I think people see that as a little bit more manipulative. And so what's more productive might be asking someone else what's going on. And then the final strategy outlined is interactive strategies. And this is where it includes talking to the friend. And I'm sure you're like, ding, ding, ding. That's the strategy we should all use. And yes, maybe this is the ideal way, but this also means confrontation. And just as a reminder, confrontation doesn't necessarily mean negative. It means you have a direct conversation. And so it could be positive as well. I just think there's like a negative stigma attached to the word confrontation. And so if you do interactive, you have to bring up how you feel, what you've seen, and have them respond. And so that could increase more uncertainty for people. So I can see why people might not go directly to interactive strategies, especially if they don't enjoy conflict or get really anxious or whatever the case might be, that they might start out passively, move to active, and then if they're still not sure, then moving to interactive. Of course, wouldn't it be great if we were all just really clear in our communication and we had that conversation and both people were open to it and responded in positive ways and people felt good after the conversation? That doesn't always happen. And so I think in some cases, people might avoid that unless it becomes the last ditch effort, or it's like, okay, I'm still feeling really uncertain. Okay, I should talk to him about it. So that might be something to keep in mind if they're like, oh, yeah, I asked so-and-so how you were feeling, and you're like, why would you ask them and not me? You might consider that as a friend that, oh, yeah, they don't really enjoy, having to bring up something about how they feel. So maybe they ask so that there'd be less of a face threat. That might be something to consider. Other people might be that's a deal breaker, that if you have a problem with me or you are concerned or you're not sure, then most people want people to come directly to them. So just some things to consider. I also talk about a newer strategy in class called extractive, and this includes when people do research online, maybe via social media. So if you're like, oh, I haven't heard from my friend in a while, and you just kind of look at their Facebook to see, oh, yeah, they were out of town for that wedding, duh. That can also be helpful, much like the passive observations. You just might be reminded of information. And so, yeah, you might look at tweets or Facebook statuses, and that can make you feel better and decrease your experience of uncertainty. It also could increase it because you're like, oh, they're spending time with these other people and not me. And then you might have to move to active. And some people might say, again, why not just ask them? And maybe it's not like, I need to sit down and talk to you. Maybe it's sending a text like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How's it going? That might be like, oh, yeah, I've been out of town and I've been meaning to call you. Boom. You get directly at the person. It's not as face-threatening as a face-to-face conversation. And you might get a response that's like, okay, everything's good. Uncertainty decreased. Check, 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 and check. So one of the things to keep in mind in that this particular description of these strategies talks about is that you can use more than one strategy in an interaction. So you could go online and do the extractive and then text them and see what's going on. Or you could observe them at a party and then go up to them at the party and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. How you been doing? What's going on? And have that interactive conversation. So there's lots of different ways you can do it, and you can use more than one strategy. So that's something to keep in mind, that you might actually see people using different strategies, or if you've only been someone to do observation, maybe you integrate a new strategy that might help you reduce uncertainty about yourself, about your friend, and about your friendship. Other people may manage uncertainty by participating in relational maintenance. And folks, I think we've talked a lot about this over the episodes of Best Forevers, and it still, to me, remains as one of the most important activities we can participate when it comes to relationships. Much like dating relationships, marriages, family, friendships aren't just for birthdays, holidays, celebrations, or for major difficulties like breakups. Friendships continue every single day. Every single day. So we need to figure out what friendships that we do want to invest in and take the time to maintain those friendships, because relationships take work. Now, it shouldn't feel like work. You're like, gosh, I feel like I'm at my job, but I'm not getting paid. If it's like that every single day, then that might be a problematic situation to be in. And maybe that's not the best friendship to invest in. But if you care about this friend and it is more positive than negative, and you've been through a lot and you want to be there together for the next 40 years, whatever the case is, then that's the relationships you want to maintain. So, and maintenance is work, because it's not just sending birthday cards, it's, checking in on people. Oh, I remember that you had a big meeting this week. How'd that go? Like, it's doing more of that. Or I was thinking about you. Here's this, again, I'm going with the memes today. So it's one of those things. It shouldn't feel like work, but sometimes we do have to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty, so to speak. So as a reminder, there are 5 primary ways to maintain relationships, including positivity, which I think focuses on that enjoyment and that fun. The next one is assurances, where you let people know that you plan to be in the relationship. Like, you're my best friend, and I can't wait for us to be best friends in retirement homes or in the commune that we're going to build. I mean, whatever. Openness, where you have conversations and you self-disclose with each other. You share tasks. Maybe it could be prepping food together, or if you do live together, it could be cleaning. There's all sorts of shared tasks, but certainly that might be something that we see more in marriages and families or people who live together. And then the last one is shared networks, that you're able to bring people together because your friends are the same friends, or that you're dating people from the same group of friends, and you can just bring everyone together. This work by Canary and Stafford is primarily related to romantic relationships. So Oswald, Clark, and Kelly in 2004 found that there are 4 main maintenance strategies for friendships that do align with Canary and Stafford's work. And this includes, first of all, positivity. I think that's what we want. We want to enjoy our relationships no matter who they're with, whether that's our new partner or our best friend or our brother or sister, that we want to have that enjoyment. And I think what makes friendship different is because it is voluntary. So if you're not having fun, then you can remove yourself from that relationship. The second one, and this goes back to the first two rules, and that is supportiveness, right? That you show support and you seek support, that this is critical in relationships being maintained over time. So if you miss an entire year of support, that relationship has probably decreased in quality. And again, I go back to, if you try to show support and seek support and you show that you're there for your friend, that might be enough. Again, they might find other venues for support. And I think as long as they know that I'm here for them and that they can seek out support and that I want their support as well, if they're getting it somewhere else, then I'm just happy that they're getting what they need. The next one is openness. So one of the main things that friends do is talk, and we share things and we problem solve together. Like, what do you think this text message means? Or they haven't texted me back. What do you think that means? All that kind of stuff is just talking and being open about it. It could be about what our goals are for 2019. It's our failures. It's how we feel about things, whatever the case is, that we can do that with our friends. And then the last one, which is maybe similar to the shared tasks, but again is going to be different in friendship unless you live with them, because in families, it's like the lawn has to be mowed and grocery shopping has to be done and dishes have to be done and dusting and so on and so forth. Like, those are things that families and partners have to do to manage the home and keep the group functioning. But in friendships, interaction might be doing things together. Okay, maybe you do live together or you do go grocery shopping together. Great. If that's what your friends do, perfect. But maybe for you, it's we play basketball on the weekend, or we play D&D together, or we go for coffee, or whatever the case is, that friends need to do things together. And sometimes maintaining relationships at a distance can be difficult because it can be harder to interact. But in the episode Like Attracts Like with best friends Sarah and Jen, we learned that there's lots of different ways to maintain relationships and you can still interact. Like, they play Ticket to Ride, which is a game. They play it on FaceTime, right? So they both each have a board. They set the game up so they know what's what when they're playing, and they do it. And that's one of the ways they do it together. I used to text message with my friends while I watched TV shows, and my mom and I would watch Downton Abbey together at a greater distance. And, there's lots of things that we can do to maintain our relationships for that interaction aspect. Sometimes we might just have to think outside the box or be a little bit creative. And when we participate in that maintenance, that can help us reduce uncertainty. And so some final thoughts about uncertainty. So Knobloch talks about lessons that can be learned from relational uncertainty. Sure, uncertainty can lead to negative outcomes like relationship termination, or it can lessen closeness between people. But there can be benefits from experiencing uncertainty. And I think that's something that we need to remember or to include in our thinking. And so when we experience these things, we shouldn't necessarily ignore it or assume that it's going to be bad. So relational uncertainty may add that mystery and that spice you're looking for, right? Like, if you enjoy uncertainty, then you're like, let's do this thing. I like it. Other people are like, I don't need spice. Spice is spice I put on my food. I don't need in my relationships. But there's ways that uncertainty can help us from, maybe we don't ask about something and so then we don't receive bad news. It can protect our face. But also it can be a time in which you can have a conversation and you can repair your relationship. And I think that's the most important thing, is that just not assuming that a relationship is going to end because it's experiencing some quote unquote problems, that we can repair, we can maintain, and we can continue with our friendship even in the face of difficulties. So it's not the end. It might be the beginning. It might be a transition. It might be a way to strengthen the relationship. So although uncertainty might make us feel uncomfortable or it might be a negative experience, it doesn't mean that the outcome might be. I also wonder if those relationships that were terminated or decreased in closeness, is what happened a deal breaker, or are people less likely to respond in a way that was more about focusing on how to fix it, how to go from there, how to make adjustments, how to be flexible, how to move on. And so if people don't move on, or figure out ways in which to manage, then relationships are likely to end. And again, as I've said lots of times, maybe it's okay for a relationship to end as well. So although uncertainty may be an uncomfortable experience, it can lead to enhancing the friendship by bringing people together and having them focus on the relationship. It seems critical to also consider that for many of us, we may not experience uncertainty as frequently or as intensely as our friends, but they may very well experience uncertainty. So talking about the friendship, expectations for the friendship, any violations of rules may help prevent the intensity and frequency of uncertainty or help manage it or reduce it. I believe that talking about uncertainty and thinking about uncertainty is important. Sometimes we may feel anxiety or uncomfortable, but we may not fully understand why. So perhaps this episode can have you considering, if you've had experiences of uncertainty in your friendships, how you've handled it, what's happened, and how you can apply it to future friendships or to current friendships. So thinking about that may help the friendships. And so please let me know if you have any stories of uncertainty and friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. So until next time, friends, let's focus on managing uncertainty and maintaining friendships, because without our friends, who would we be? Before we close out the episode with the conclusion and the promo for the episode, there is a reason why I was thinking about this episode this week. Yeah, we can experience uncertainty in our friendships, but we do experience a lot of uncertainty in life. And in the last week, many of my friends from high school and people that I know from Sexton High School in Lansing, Michigan, we lost one of our friends. And so I've really been thinking about how uncertain life can be and what it's like for her two best friends, a friendship of the three of them that I've really have admired and loved watching on Facebook. And I wish I would have said more to them because I think that their friendship is so beautiful. So for the three of them to lose one of their friends, I know that they're probably experiencing a lot of loss right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so one of the things that I would like to say is that this is a reminder that life is really short and that there is a lot of uncertainty, but it's when we need to band together and be strong for each other and do what we can to make it through. And Kristin is someone that I knew from high school. We did cheerleading together. A group of us went to prom together. I had her in classes. And she, over the years, has been someone who has helped my mom in doctor's offices. And she's someone that I often followed on Facebook and responded to. And so I am managing my own thoughts about the loss of someone and how unfair it feels right now that she's gone, for her family, for her son, for her friends, for her coworkers. And I just wanted to say that my heart goes out to all of them, and that Kristin was a very good mother and a very good person. And if you would like to support Kristin's son and her family, I am going to link to her GoFundMe in the show notes. And so if you're so inclined, then please support Kristin and her son, her family, and her friends. Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hi, it's Carolyn.
And Vanessa.
From Not Another X-Files podcast.
We're the female-led X-Files podcast you didn't even know you were looking for.
We've got plenty of opportunities for nostalgia, conspiracies, forbidden romance, and plenty of laughs.
It's true. Come on over to our place in Vancouver, Canada, and revisit your favorite 90s sci-fi TV show.
You'll be glad you stopped by. You can find us on all your favorite podcast spots.
And on the web at notanotherxfpod.libsyn.com.
Bye.
Bye.
Music for this promo by Purple Planet.